I'm live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the FMA Dumpster Fire Podcast. My name is Paulo Rubio, aka GN, and today I have Todd Fossey with me. He's the chief instructor of IDS, Integrative Defense Strategies, and we're going to talk about some things that he already talked about, but we're going to expand upon those things. Some things he talked about on the FMA Discussion Podcast with Dean Franco and Edison Pena. If you haven't already seen that podcast, go to FMA Discussion and check it out. And I want to preempt this by saying, look, I just want to say, go visit www.thisidids.com and get you some learn on. Without further ado, my man, Todd Fossey in the house. What's up, Todd?
Paulo, what's up, my brother?
Oh, man. Dude, I just watched that podcast you did. And I was fired up, man. I've been waiting for that podcast to happen for a long time. You know, I characterize you as one of my FMA instructors, even though you suck at FMA. Now,
I've never done it. I've never done it before. I've never done it.
But man, you're instrumental. Now, I don't want to have to explain why I say that. Why do you think I characterize you as an FMA instructor for me, even though you suck at FMA?
Well, you know, I've never, we've never actually had this conversation before. I've heard you say that, but we've never really delved into why you say that. I can only make an assumption. So here's my assumption.
Okay.
I think that you like the way that I take a holistic approach towards self-defense with the firearm and all the other disciplines that I integrate with it. And I have a hunch that you see how the blade or stick can substitute the firearm. That's my hunch.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's so umbrella-ish. You know, we can get into the details about neuropsychology and all that awesome stuff that you talk about sound decision making under stress. All of those things relate to my craft. I think where we diverge a little bit is that, you know, I love the art. Maybe we don't, but I love the artful elements of it. I love that I have fun and that it's a physical communication that I get to have with my friends.
Yeah.
Do those things exist within IDS too? You guys have fun too? You guys like being with each other too?
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. Hey, look, when it comes to FMA and other martial arts, I'm all about that. Like, I think that that's great. I strongly encourage it. There are so many intangible benefits that come with that have tremendous value for human beings and for the world. And I encourage it. I really do. As long as we're calling it what it is.
Yeah, for real.
Where I have an issue is when people are calling, you know, these martial arts self-defense when they're clearly not.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we can draw a bridge as to what or how some of those intangibles can be a part of a self-defense matrix. So what are those intangibles that you may be talking about when you say there is a benefit to martial arts?
Yeah, so, well, one, you already mentioned we still have a good time. You know, when you're talking about, like, we take our self-defense at IDS pretty seriously, you know, and we look for students who are committed. We don't dabblers don't last very long here, you know.
Yeah.
We take our self-defense pretty seriously, but all that means is that they're a student who's committed to their craft. That's what that means. So when you do that, like, you know, in order for that to be sustainable, you have to have a good time, right? There still needs to be camaraderie, and you still need to have some laughs. And so there's some gallows humor in there. You know, we still have fun. Then other intangibles that come with that, you know, like, you know, we fail a lot.
Humility.
So so the whole process is really a part of what we call positive resistance, personal development through positive resistance. And that makes us a more confident person. It feeds our self-esteem. You know, obviously we're going to be more fit, you know, in a healthy way, but we're doing things that are a constant challenge to us in the right ways. And because we're constantly failing, then it offers that natural part of humility and that vulnerability, which when we can become comfortable with that vulnerability ends up making us a more competent and well-rounded person all around, a happier person and a healthier person all around. So those are, just off the top of my head, those are just a handful of some of the tangibles that come with, straight line self-defense.
I like that, and sometimes people have conversations that sound like things like loyalty, integrity, honor, respect are under the sole domain of traditional martial arts. I mean, you can get those things from a boxing gym. You can get it at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy in an MMA class. You can get it at IDS, working your ass off, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an unfair thing that traditional martial arts claim to be their sole domain. I think it's inaccurate.
Yeah, they sort of have this unspoken thing where it's implied that they somehow have the moral high ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just out the sheer, the right, just the.
It's crazy.
What I mean?
I was talking with Datu Kelly Warden. He just commented right now about how we talked about something similar, where he said, you want loyalty with consequences. We're talking biker gangs, and so he sort of alluded to this idea that traditional martial arts do not hold sole ownership of these amazing things that you can get from so many other places, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah, not even just self-defense, but lots of places you could get it, right?
Exactly. All right, so now we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about carrying multiple weapons. Now, for the sake of this conversation, right? Like in your head, it could be gun, knife, or gun, knife. But in my head, it's going to be, and for the people who are listening, it's going to be about carrying multiple knives, right? One here, spare one here, one out your ass, whatever. Good idea or terrible idea to be carrying multiple knives?
Can I give a little background, a little context first before I answer the question?
Yes, of course.
At IDS, we take our weapon retention and weapon access very, very, very seriously. We put more time in, and myself personally, we put more time into this on a regular basis. I'll just come right out and say it, probably than anybody anywhere else. I put more commitment into this, just about,
That's a bold claim, my brother.
If there's other people out there putting in the amount of time that I am with this, I'm excited about that. I'm glad to hear that. But all I'm saying is, like, just with training rounds, I put in about a minimum of about 15 rounds a week, 5 to 8 minute rounds with weapons-based grappling. Okay. And then on top of all the other grappling and the time that I spend one-on-one with my mentor, Greg Nelson. And this isn't just this week, I'm talking about over several years, right? Year after year after year, we do this, and we're constantly, refining and collating the process and developing curriculum around it and theory and philosophy. So over that amount of time, when we first started doing this several years ago, we would carry a support side defensive blade, and our most of our weapon retention revolves around the handgun at the same time. And it wasn't long, 6 months into that, and I'm talking about 12 years ago, right? 6 months into that, we started realizing during our combative sessions, which were pretty hardcore, we were throwing our blades off all the time, because our blades were always while we were retaining our firearm, we were leaving our support side blade exposed. Or sometimes we would experiment with having more than one blade on a time, because we would say, hey, look, there's a lot of people out there who think it's fashionable to carry 2 or 3 blades on the top of their handgun.
Or 11 if you're a SIOC guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, FMA thing.
Yeah, so we're like, well, shit, that's almost, I know how difficult it is to retain a weapon when you're very well versed in weapon retention in all different positions. So now when you're carrying multiple weapons, it becomes exponentially more difficult. So we came to the conclusion after a while that it was in our best interest to just carry the one weapon, because we know how vulnerable we become when we have more than one on. So to be completely blunt, I don't suggest carrying more than one of any weapon. Doesn't mean I don't carry support. I carry a utility blade, but deep in my pocket, which makes it virtually impossible for somebody else to access.
Okay. Before I ask my follow-up question, you mentioned Greg Nelson. I don't know who this guy is. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna spew off what he has in his website. Okay, just so for the people who don't know who Greg Nelson is, if you've been living under a rock, he's the head trainer of now 4 UFC world champions. He's a Pedro Sauer Gracie Jiu-Jitsu 4th degree black belt. One of the firsts, right? Is
He
that
was
right?
first, the very first in the United States.
Okay. This is huge. He's an NCAA Division 1 wrestler from the University of Minnesota. He's a 6th degree Muay Thai black belt. He's an Ajahn. He's a modern Army combatives level 4 instructor. I believe he helped develop that program, did he not?
Yeah, yeah.
He's so modest. He's like, oh, that's so Greg, right? He's a full instructor under Dan Inosanto. Okay, guys. So now we have some idea about who Greg Nelson is and why Todd Fossey studying with Greg Nelson has relevance. Well, it has relevance, but why it's specifically interesting for Filipino martial artists.
You forgot the most important credentials on there.
What's that?
I'm his firearms instructor,
That's right.
and he's an adjunct instructor for IDS.
Is he really now?
Yeah,
When did he? Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Did he go through the levels or no? Well, you guys train every
We
day.
train yeah.
Yeah.
We do firearms Fridays where he's been to several of our boot camps as a student and as an instructor, and then also he trains with me personally every single Friday. So
He learns
knows our
different,
program.
man.
He
He
knows our
learns
program.
different too.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, he does.
one of the things he mentioned to me while I was there with you guys hanging out was that he observes his kids' classes and he learns from them. Right?
Yeah.
We can get into that, but back to the topic of why it's a terrible idea to be carrying more than one knife. Guys, again, when I say carrying more than one knife, in Todd's head, he's talking about weapons for cowboys, maybe 2 shooters. But it's a terrible idea because of the liability it presents in terms of what the highest priorities are in what you teach, which is concealment and retention.
Yes.
Is that correct? Have I?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I have one thing I want to say though, one disclaimer.
Yeah.
This is what we believe. I don't
Right.
want to give an absolute answer to a contextually dependent question. So we believe. Yeah.
Absolutely. And because that's there are going to be people out there who listen to this who may have had experiences in the past that is contrary to what you just said. Well, I was in this fight, I lost one of my weapons, and so I had to go to the second weapon, and that weapon was my lifesaver, right? That's always going
Yeah.
that's always going to be the case. So this is what you believe, and you believe this because you work it. You
Well,
work it.
and not only that, but understanding, I'm also a certified force science analyst. So I have a very strong understanding for the data surrounding the high probability of violent encounters. I know where they're probably going to end up, and I know how they happen. So I'm not just taking an arbitrary approach toward this. I know for a fact there are cases for sure that law enforcement has have used their defensive blade to help return
Right.
their sidearm, right?
Right.
But for a regular person, right? For a regular person where it's not mandated, they carry a defensive blade. Where a lot of departments mandate that. We've found that and not only that. Something else I want to say. We have classes here all week long. Not just my personal training. We have classes here all week long, and we have 40 affiliates across North America, very high level people. So then we have tons of training events. So my point is, we have a huge sample size when it comes to this.
That sample size is important. Good. You're not pulling this out of your ass, and you're not just saying things arbitrarily. You have the proof to back it up, and you've got science to back it up too, don't you? I mean, tell us a little bit about your background real quick while within the first 15 minutes of this video. Talk to us about your history, your past in dealing with brains.
Yeah, so my background is neuropsychology, specifically psychophysiology. There's an even bigger scientific word called psychoneuroimmunology. I lectured at medical schools on the topic for 15 years, and I was in private practice for 15 years. And a lot of that practice revolved around human dynamics, human performance, especially human performance under stress, human dynamics under stress, then the science of skill acquisition, how human beings learn and acquire
Wow.
specific types of skills.
All right. As you do in your jam session, you just did a riff, and I'm a play off that. The science of skill acquisition. Let me separate myself from what I've heard and my own experiences, because my experiences in Filipino martial arts have been really good. I've been really lucky, and I think that has to do with the balance of where I also came from in the tactical community and having made the mistakes that I've made in the past, and having friends like you to just kind of keep me like, yo, chill out, dude. That's what are you doing? I got a lot of people who keep me in check, so that's really healthy for me. But in Filipino martial arts, when we talk about skill acquisition, we're often meant to do endless, sometimes mindless repetition for years, and years and years. And oftentimes we get caught up in things like rehearsals and choreography and patterns and drills. And when we become collectors of these patterns and drills, we tend to just want to go faster with it, maybe fooling ourselves into thinking that we are improving. So how long does it actually take to acquire a skill to a functional level? Let's start with that.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts around speed as well. I'd love to get into the topic
Amen.
of speed.
Go ahead. Jam session.
Yeah, let's do it. But
Skill acquisition.
yeah, so I'll do the best I can to sort of simplify this. And if we want to dive into it deeper, I'm happy to do that. But there's something that happens in skill acquisition called myelination. And myelination is when long-term relationships are formed within neural nets and neural connections. And there's more to that, but I'll just leave it at that for now, okay?
Okay.
That when myelination begins to occur is the very beginnings of what we call unconscious competence. There's 4 different stages to competence. The first stage to competence is when a person is unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know, but they think they know through the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is when people of low ability, right, suffer from what's called an illusory superiority. They think they're way better than they are. And the phenomenon also includes what's called, forgive the big words, but this is the actual definition, a metacognitive inability to recognize their own ineptitude. In other words, they don't recognize how bad they suck at this. But
Yes.
they think they know. I actually have a poster of it on my wall here in the training center that Paulo made for me. Okay. So that then we have consciously incompetent. Now they realize they finally know what they don't know and what they can't do. And that can be very humbling. And it's something we all want to experience a lot. Then we have consciously competent, where people can do things that requires a lot of effort for them to do it. And then the 4th stage is unconscious competence, where people don't have to think about it anymore. Now this 4th stage is what I'm talking about. In order for a person, for myelination to occur and the 4th stage to occur, it's a minimum of 20 minutes a day of practice for 12 consecutive weeks to reach unconscious competence with one skill. Now that 20 minutes a day needs to be maintained for that level of skill to be maintained. The less you practice, the more the skill tends to wane and diminish. The more you practice, the better you get it. Then we've added, at IDS, we've added a 5th stage, which is what we call the level of mastery, where we can improvise and innovate.
Is that a linear process? Can you begin to improvise or explore innovation and improvisation from the very beginning stages of learning? Or do you have to go through a phase of mimicry first? How does that work? I mean,
I think it varies from person to person based on what their background is, what the previous skills are that they had,
Right.
what their different people have different levels of plasticity. It's easier for children to learn faster than it is for adults because they have a
Yeah.
higher level of plasticity. Really, about 70% of our neural connections are rewiring themselves every single hour. Most people, it's
Yeah.
called neuro, right? So there's variations to that. Most people will start in a way that's sort of linear and mimicry, and then that will open up with time. That's how it occurs with most people, but not exclusively. Some people can start to improvise immediately.
So let's talk about this then, okay? I'm going to assume you like the jab or the cross as a tool that you craft, right? Is that a correct assumption? It should be.
Yeah.
Okay, right? Just fundamental striking. So in the Filipino martial arts, we have the angle one, right? It's the caveman strike. It's the thing that you don't really need to be taught how to do. And we spend an astronomical amount of time without one technique perfecting things like, angular perfection. Like this angle one needs to be at this particular angle. And we spent a lot of time with that same kind of process and methodology with even more sophisticated and elaborate techniques. What's a better way than just mindlessly repeating it and what's the danger in getting my angle one and practicing my angle one exactly to that, right? What's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
danger in being really good at making your angle one that perfect?
Yeah, I'll tell you. First, I have an itch on my nose, and I want to say that I'm going to scratch my nose because I really have an itch because I'm an expert in reading body language and deception, right? So I know when a person is giving an answer and they touch their nose, it's probably an indicator of deception that they're lying. Really have an itch on my nose.
Scratch
Hold
the
on.
nose. Scratch the nose. You got
Okay. Okay.
Let me get one too. All right. Woo!
All right.
All right. Let's talk.
Because I'm like, he's lying. He touched his nose. He's lying.
All right. So what's the
Okay, so-
danger in the technical perfection of just the jab by air drills
Well,
or just the
here's how-
angle one?
Here's how at IDS, here's how we approach skill acquisition. Okay. First, we prioritize what we teach a person based on what they need first.
Okay.
Because based on what the probability is first. If they need that first, right, then that's probably what we're going to start with. Then the level of complexity after that. Okay. And then a level
Wait, is the
of
student
difficulty.
expected to know what they need first? Because grandmasters will have you believe that they know better than you what you need.
Yeah, that's true. That's another conversation.
Okay, that's
Right.
another conversation.
What I do is I cite the data and I provide the data for them for the reason for why we do it first because
Boom.
we're finding a meta analysis of what the data suggests is highest priority to lowest priority. Okay.
Yeah, real quick, just so that I can interject, a lot of Filipino martial arts systems or a lot of martial arts systems prioritize what ought to be learned first based on nothing but the system requirements. They're not
Right.
seeking data. They're not seeking what is most probable. They're just going, this is where we start the system from, so learn that thing first. That's not how
Yeah.
you do things. Okay.
We stay away from what's arbitrary.
Okay.
We stay away from what's arbitrary, and that's also true in the firearms world, by the way.
I get it.
But I know you do, even more so. So we start with that. We start with what the probabilities based on what the data suggests. That's our baseline. Okay, but the way that we approach things, we first start by teaching our students a concept, a broad concept, because we know that's what a student will retain first. Just the loose idea, it's broad, and we know they aren't going to be refined to a razor's edge right away, and that's going to take time. So we just want, as long as they have the concept, we realize they can retain that. That's probably be enough to keep them alive today. They leave class today, they're faced with a critical incident, they can probably apply the concept and retain it. Then we're going to apply the gross motor after that, because that's what they'll retain next. We'll focus on concept, then gross motor. After the gross motor concept, then we'll focus on refining the fine motor. That's going to take time. Then after the fine motor becomes refined to an extent, then we get into what we call sensory motor, where it's even more refined, what their eyes are seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, what they're smelling, what they're tasting, pressures, energies, feel, flow. That comes last, but also that's what they lose first. So they lose that skill in the reverse order that they retained it in. So That's what's going to be most important for us at IDS. So we don't seek perfection right away. It's a process very similar to what the analogy we use as a sculptor. We start by knocking off all the big pieces first, and then
Mm-hmm.
we slowly refine that with time. And the research actually shows that human beings will perform better over a longer period of time because they've gone through this um, sort of a gestation period, through their learning. So we don't seek perfection on day one, not even close. We just want our students to have fun and learn the concepts first.
Okay. But that phase, that last phase, the part of that skill that goes away first, I imagine there's a lot of focus into maintaining that and to not have to lose it. And I think you do this through scenarios, micro scenarios, a lot of rolling, a lot of
Yeah,
sparring, right?
yeah. We
It's
call
funny, might be
live
funny to
energy.
hear.
Live
Yeah,
energy.
live energy. Once you get to that phase of learning, is there still a value in going back to the previous phases?
Yeah, that's what we do all the time here at IDS. It's like, I don't know if the audience can sort of see this. We call it a loop. So we'll work our way through this process, but then we'll loop back to the beginning, and
Right.
we'll rinse and repeat. We'll just continue on this loop. So that way we aren't letting our fundamentals fall back. So for example, in my Tuesday night class, by the way, weapons-based grappling is its own art form. I have two very high level grapplers in my Tuesday night weapons-based combatives class. Okay. Very high level grapplers, high level black belts. Okay. And they've been starting to learn our weapons-based grappling algorithm. We teach things in templates and algorithms. And they recently came to me and said, you know what, man, that's really helped me understand that I have holes in my game because I've let some of my fundamental skills wane. And I'm really glad to go back to the beginning of some of these things so that I
Yeah.
can refine it and then look at it from a different angle. The angle of weapon retention, weapon access in self-defense is going to be a much different angle than it is for sport grappling.
So what I'm hearing is that this technical perfection of an angle one and attaining that level of perfection and spending an extraordinary amount of time is detrimental to the actual development of what that angle one is designed to do in a fight. You
Well,
need,
it's linear versus non-linear.
there
you
you
know
go.
s- right, so it's a linear learning, whereas we're taking multiple disciplines in a non-linear way and learning all those disciplines together simultaneously.
I'm gonna take a deep breath for a second. We're gonna circle back. We're gonna circle back for a second about carrying multiple knives, and then I wanna jump forward to where we are now and talk about rolling with a knife. All right, so let's circle back for a second, and I'm gonna say this: the reason, Mr. Fossey, that we carry more than one knife is in the event that we lose one in a fight, and that we've got a backup, and if we lose that, well, we've got nine more. What have you got to say to this logic that we carry multiple knives in case we get disarmed or we lose one or we leave one into the body of our dead enemies?
Yeah, and we drink their blood out of their skulls.
Of course. What is the point in battle if we cannot drink the blood of enemies from their skulls?
I think it might have, I see the use of the blade having more of a realistic application for warriors than for regular people, what we call citizen defenders. I had a long conversation actually with Greg Nelson last night about that. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
Wait,
But
am I not a warrior as a civilian? What are you talking about,
uh,
bro? Can't you see the
sorry,
tribal tattoos? I mean,
sorry, buddy. Sorry,
automatic warrior. No, no. Damn it.
sorry,
Okay, please
sorry, buddy.
explain.
So what we found is that it's really easy to get stuck on the bottom and even on the top. You get stuck in a position, in any position. It's easy to do when you're in the clinch. It's easy to do when you're up against a wall or a barrier, and it's even easier to do when you're on the ground. So people have more of an opportunity to see and feel what's on you, right?
Hmm.
And so because there are so many precarious positions that we can find ourselves in, the more exposure that those blades, we'll say for now, or those force multipliers have to your adversary, I mean, not to be Captain Obvious here, but the easier it is for them to get their hands on it, take it away from you, and use it on you. If I just have one on me, now let's just use the ground, for example. Now I can train myself in most cases to go that side down. So I'm using the ground for concealment and retention. Or if I'm in a position where I can't go that side down, where I can use my arm and my legs in certain ways for me to conceal
Right.
and retain. Whereas it's almost impossible for me to do that in what I'm carrying in multiple positions.
Right. You're using the ground as a retention tool, which
Yeah, and not only that,
makes sense.
just the cognitive load. The more that you split your focus on multiple
Yeah.
things, the more that your skills deteriorate, right?
Right. So if I've got a knife here and a knife there, I effectively just have too many things to juggle. Right. Is that what you're saying? And it becomes a
Yeah,
liability. I'm trying to protect, I'm trying to
especially
retain or
yeah.
conceal or deploy and use
And
too many.
especially under stress in a life or death situation where someone's punching you in the face or trying to kill you with another force multiplier, or there's multiple attackers, 56.6% chance of more than one attacker. You're on a dangerous and hard surface. The list goes on and on and on. So you have so many variables that you have to process and deal with. Just that overload by itself makes it extremely challenging. And I'm speaking from a tremendous amount of experience with this,
Right.
and a mentor that is at the highest level.
But you make a distinction between us regular. By the way, I'm really disappointed I'm not a warrior. I wasted like a lot of money on this tribal tattoo. I thought I was one already.
It is a badass tattoo, though.
I like it, but but man, okay, I'm not a warrior. But you do make a distinction with warriors, and you said you had a conversation with Greg Nelson. So I assume you're
Last
talking
night.
about soldiers. I
Last night,
assume,
yeah.
yeah. So for them,
I'm
it makes sense, right? To have a backup of some sort.
okay. Well, let me build a little context around this. Now I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, but
Not on this podcast.
all I'm going to do is ask. I'm just asking honest questions. Okay, I'm just
Fair.
asking honest questions. This was the context of the conversation I had with Greg last night. I have to be, I have to ask the honest question: what types of circumstances is a defensive blade going to be beneficial or practical in self-defense?
Yeah, that's a topic that you covered in the FMA discussion podcast, which you guys should all subscribe to, by the way. And I had to pause the video and to think about it. Basically, you're asking under what conditions can I use a knife in a self defense in a real self
And not
defense
only
condition
that,
anyway.
when is it, and even when you're justified to legally use it, when is it going to be tactically advantageous?
When okay, when meaning when as
In,
that situation evolves
in self-defense, is that
in
knife
self
going to be,
defense.
when is
Right.
that knife going to be tactically advantageous when you're legally justified to use it?
Right. The only things that I could really come up with were if there was a discrepancy, whether in force or in numbers, and where all avenues for disengagement and escape have been exhausted. Right. That's really, and I don't carry a knife, bro. I 99.9% of the time, like I carry a knife when I go to the river, when I go to the forest. I keep a knife in my car just in case, but I'm not one of
Yeah.
these dudes who walks around with a knife thinking that I'm gonna, because you know what, dude, there was a one time in my life, very early on in my Filipino martial arts journey, where nothing bad happened, guys. Nothing bad happened, but I was carrying a knife, and I had what basically amounted to an ego clash with some dude I didn't know because he was walking where I wanted to drive to. One of the dudes is like, I don't care if this is a parking lot, or a driveway. I'm gonna take my time. And I'm like honking at him, and he's like, "Brr," and I was like, "Brr," and I got out of my car, and it was like, "Brr, it's brr," and I take out my knife, and I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm an idiot. I am an idiot." Nothing happened. Didn't stab him, right? But it also didn't scare him. He was willing to continue the chicken dance. right? And so it de-escalated. I got back in my car, but I live with that. I'm like, I'm a friggin' idiot. I could have changed the course of my whole entire life, right? Had he grabbed me or done something, and I had this knife in my hand that was out way too early
Yeah.
and was not justified. And I just felt like an absolute idiot. And I feel like there's a lot of absolute idiots waiting to happen in Filipino martial arts. And, or just even if they don't study Filipino martial, just dudes who carry knives, man. Such a liability, especially if you're emotional like me. So I don't carry a knife anymore. It's just a bad idea.
Well, I want to take it a few steps further than that. First of all, I'm glad that you shared that story because there's other people listening that need to hear that probably. So there's the legal justification for the use of a lethal force multiplier like a blade, right? And the general legality, the first legality is you must first be reasonably in immediate fear of death or great bodily harm. The second one is you must be an unwilling participant in that conflict. The third one is you must have no reasonable means of retreat in most states, but even if it's not a law, it's still a legal, still going to be an important part of your legal defense. And then fourthly, you must have no lesser force option that you could have used to stop that threat. So, and the use of force continuum says using the same level of force that comes against you without going beyond that level of force, the moment the threat has been stopped, then you must stop. But now let's take a look at some data.
Wait, can you
Okay.
repeat those before? Can you repeat those things again? Those are
Yeah.
really important things because while jurisdictions may differ, these are some pillars that are
Yeah.
probably going to exist. So, what are these
Yeah.
actual self-defense conditions where you can use lethal force? Or
Yeah, so these are always a part of every drill that we do. Everything. We don't do empty kinetic training. Like the decision making is always baked into our training. We don't just work physical skills on
yep,
their isolated, right? You've been here, you've seen
I've
it.
trained. I've trained
Yeah,
IDS, man.
yeah,
So, but please do repeat them.
yeah,
It's worth repeating for all you people listening who have no
yeah.
idea
So
what self-defense is.
I can't, it's hard for me to imagine a self-defense class that doesn't just absolutely ingrain this into their students and have it
Well,
be just like a baseline of everything that they do.
Well, there's a line that they can say that kind of absolves them from responsibility, and that's, go talk to a lawyer. Blah, blah, blah will differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I've heard that. But there are pillars that are going to exist, right? If not by way of law, but at least as part of your legal defense. Please repeat them, Todd. It's
Yeah.
really, really important.
Sure. So the first one is well, we'll just use lethal force for now, okay? Because we're talking about blades, right? It's a
We're talking
lethal
about,
weapon. So
yes,
you
sir.
must first reasonably be in immediate fear of death or great bodily harm. In some jurisdictions, that would also include substantial bodily harm. So let's talk about
Immediate.
that. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Bodily harm means you're just going to receive bumps, bruises, and scrapes, right? That's bodily harm.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a simple assault. Okay. Then there's substantial bodily harm, which means you're going to receive protracted loss or impairment of a member of any organ or bodily function. Could be a limb, could be an organ, right? So protracted loss or impairment would be substantial. Great bodily harm means a high probability of death. Okay. A high probability of death. And so that's the first pillar, using the same level. So when I see knife classes, I'm like, so what variables are you training your students to respond to? Everything? So
Yeah.
every stimuli that they're faced to, they're being trained to wield a knife and employ it.
Yeah. As soon as someone grabs you, right, you can just slash him 45 times.
Yeah, that's a simple assault, right? So we gotta give that a lot of thought. The second
Mm-hmm.
one is, were you a willing participant in that conflict? In your case, in your story that you shared, a prosecutor probably could have very easily concluded that you were a willing participant in that conflict because you escalated. You wanted that fight to happen. You got out of your car. You didn't avoid. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't do any of those things. It wasn't the other person that was necessarily encroaching on you that was being non-compliant, right?
Yeah.
With your wishes and your commands and your requests.
And we
Right?
have a
So
lot of
that,
martial artists who have this hero complex, and they put themselves in situations where they may be able to do good, but they become willing participants. They jump into scenarios. And I'm not saying not to do that. That's going to vary case by case, scenario by scenario. Sometimes you got to be that person.
yeah.
But it will go against you if you are a willing participant in that
Well,
engagement.
let me just clarify that a little bit. It could, depending
It
on
could.
where you're
Yeah.
at and because it's always going to be circumstantial. But what I'm not suggesting that people intervene. And by the way, if a person intervenes, it doesn't necessarily make them a willing participant because they didn't want that to happen. That was happening. Somebody else was in big trouble, so they intervened. And I'm also not going to shame a person for not intervening. That's their own personal value
Yeah, that's
system.
important.
We
Yeah, that's
stay out
important.
of that. We stay out of that. So we create a distinction between the moral and the legal. Right now, I'm talking about the legal side of it, right?
Right on.
The third thing on the legal side of it is, well, by the way, a lot of people get in trouble because they're willing participants. And if you're going to come to the aid of another person, they must also be another unwilling participant, right? So if my wife talks shit to somebody and they put hands on her and she escalated that, now I go to her defense, I could be in really big trouble. Okay. So it depends on the circumstances. Um, so we've got must be reasonable means of immediate fear of death, great bodily harm. You must be an unwilling participant. There must be no reasonable means of retreat is the third one. So in the United States, about half of the states are what are called stand your ground states
Yeah.
or castle doctrine states, where you have the right to be where you are. The law doesn't expect you to retreat from that situation. You have a right to stand your ground. About half of the states don't. So like in my state where I am, I have a legal obligation to retreat if I can do so safely and reasonably. Just because it's possible for me to retreat doesn't mean that it's reasonable for me to retreat.
Right.
But even so, even if you're in a stand your ground state, it will still be an important part of your legal defense. Okay? So if you think about the distances that edged weapons take place at with what I'm talking about so far, this becomes very important for you. Then the fourth one is there's no lesser force option that you could use to stop that threat. There was nothing else that you reasonably could have done.
Huh. That's interesting. Because I got a question in my head now, and a couple of jokes actually, but a question in my head is that, and maybe that's why Filipino martial artists don't train striking. It's because that's another option.
Right?
No, okay. I'm joking. No, Filipino martial artists who box or I guess are all right, but that's those things are really, really important. I think a lot of people misunderstand what a self-defense condition really is, and that's really, really dangerous if you're going to take seriously, Filipino martial arts or any bladed arts or any weapon-based thing.
Even
dangerous.
even if it's not weapon based, let's talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a second. Oh, that guy threw a punch at you, so you took him down and choked him out. You obstructed his airway. You used lethal force. Oh, that guy threw you up against the wall, so you took him down and you broke his arm. You used excessive force.
Right.
That's substantial bodily harm, man.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely.
They don't talk about the use of force or the legalities of those things and almost anything that's called self-defense, including Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's another reason why what we do with our grappling is very different than sport. Just one. There are many reasons why.
Absolutely. Well, let's get back to it. Hey, this is going according to plan. Now we're going to jump back and we're talking about rolling with a knife.
Okay.
Because I love that stuff, man. And it sucks. I suck at it. But it's important. A quick story, you guys. I spent about a year, maybe a year and a half, working on my quick knife draw from Appendix. And, I thought I pressure tested it enough against, clinch fighting, drawing from that position, a little bit of ground fighting. And then I go to Minnesota and I roll with Greg Nelson. and he kills me with my own knife over and over and over again. And I scrapped a year and a half's worth of training. I was like, screw that. That is going to be a liability. I still enjoy rolling with a knife, but I have second thoughts about deploying my knife while on the ground. Like, that's a really, really important part of my training, because I identify so many of my points of failure, where I suck, things I need to work on by engaging in that kind of practice. I hope you're not frozen. Can you still hear me? And we might have lost Mr. Todd Fossey. But anyway, guys, I'm going to continue until Todd gets back. I roll with a knife, and I do so with like Division I wrestlers, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, with combat submission wrestling, CSW, is that what it stands for? I do it a lot, and I get my ass kicked a lot. But I learn a lot of things in the process. But the practice itself is so humiliating. Humiliating in a good way. Todd, are you there? I'm going to remove him for a second. Todd. What's going on? Todd, I can hear you.
Hey, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear like doors slamming.
So check this out. The power went out where I'm at.
Oh,
so
really?
I'm trying to feel my way out of my office and through my training center. And I'm going to go outside and finish the... Hold on. I'm good.
You should have trained for that, bro.
Oh, yeah. If I knew what I was doing, this would have never happened, right? Yeah. All right.
But anyway,
I'm going to go outside. I think we're going to be good.
Oh, there we go. Sweet.
Okay.
I was just talking about how much I get my ass kicked rolling with a knife, and why I still do it, and the things I learned from it. I still have a distinction between some of the things I do in training and some of the things that I would never do in application. A lot of that is mostly art stuff. But deploying a knife while rolling on the ground, for me, I'll keep doing it in training, but I would hesitate. I would hesitate to say that's a skill set that I have that I'm ready to deploy in a real go. What's your experience been like with that stuff? Man, Greg Nelson.
Well, you want to be the timing of when is going to be really important. My first suggestion would be, first of all, make sure you're justified and that there's necessity, but also make sure that you're primarily, in most cases, that you're in a dominant position so that you can do that safely, and to help prevent a scramble too, because now when there's a frenetic scramble that's happening, right? Now that blade is not discriminate for who it's cutting. It may not just be cutting, your adversary, but it may also be cutting you. So knowing how to work to those dominant positions before you deploy it is going to be critical.
Absolutely. One of the other things that I also work on is just protecting that knife, whether it's mine, his. I work on knife defense, try to mitigate the damage by putting myself in less than ideal situations in trying to protect that knife, because I will turtle up to protect that knife, to earn a moment in time to get to a better position, understanding the vulnerabilities that I present in that position. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about that training with the right people.
Can you still see me okay?
Yeah, I can still see you.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's super important, man. It's its own art. And it really takes time, and you really have to be humbled with it over and over and over again for you to really hone that craft. But it's incredibly important because, we do a ton of weapon retention work here on our feet too in the clinch.
Yeah,
and a lot of those. In confined spaces up against walls and barriers, and it's very, very common for those different types of situations that we train in to go to the ground inadvertently. Even though we're good at staying on our feet, inevitably a lot of scrambles just end up on the ground. So who knows? Maybe you tripped. Maybe somebody took you down. Maybe
Hmm.
you tried to take somebody else down and you went down with them. It just happens that way. So we find if you're going to carry a weapon, you're going to carry a weapon that's very, very important for us. It's very important for us to be comfortable down there. And not to mention, we feel strongly that it's important that we make the assumption that our adversary has a weapon too. So not only are we retaining our own, but we're also defending against them accessing theirs or using theirs on us. It's a 5D chess match, man, and it's a mind fuck.
It absolutely is. And again, it kind of lends itself to being neglected by people who are just supremely concerned about just presenting perfection. There's not, I mean, I have not met a human being that can issue a legitimate guarantee that when you roll with a knife, you're not going to get caught. There's just you call it a 5D chess match, man, and it is an absolute mind fuck. The thing though is, Todd, as a Filipino martial artist, I would never go to the ground.
Right.
Never.
Right.
No,
Right.
because my FMA sucks if I find myself on the ground.
Yeah.
What is why is that dumb? That's my smart question. Why am I dumb to think that way? Why am I dumb? Why am I ridiculous
I think
to
it's
say things like, yeah, I'm an FMA practitioner. I would never go to the ground. Otherwise, my FMA sucks.
It's I think that what's happening is that's a dogmatic approach that's designed to create a sort of a pseudo logic that only exists in a vacuum, and then that way the instructor or the master or whoever can't really ever get exposed for what they don't know.
Bingo. Now, Todd, there is another layer, a cultural layer attached to that in Filipino culture, maybe in other cultures, certainly in martial arts culture. And that has to do with respecting your elders. You know, you don't question these things.
Oh, this is better.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, you don't question these things. You ought not to be skeptical. You ought to trust the experience of your instructor. Why is that? Why is that?
Well, that's also
cool?
that's also important too.
Yes.
It's also important that you do trust them, but you have to find this balance. I think not have to, but I suggest finding the balance between having trust in your instructor that they're going to be intellectually honest with you, but also thinking for yourself.
Yeah,
So,
you're really demanding a lot out of students, out of the human. First, they got to know what they need, and then they have to be able to identify when their instructor is being intellectually dishonest. Seems like a lot. I'm
you know, I
joking, bro.
think I know. I think a clue. I think a clue is, if your instructor starts to frame things in a way that says this is all you need to know, right, and doesn't allow you to ask any difficult questions,
Yep.
then there are other things too that are going to be big clues, but those are two off the top of my head. And if you do have difficult questions, do it the right way. Don't be disruptive to the class. Don't be
Of course.
disruptive to the culture of the school. Talk to them privately after class about
Right.
questions that you're having, and have an exploratory conversation without being accusatory in a way that
Yeah.
contributes to the culture of the school. That's important too.
I think taking accountability for your own progress and your own journey allows you to still be in the presence of these certain instructors who believe what they believe, and then you just extract from it the things that are useful from you, which may include the artistic, the cultural, the historical significance of Filipino martial arts. I think maybe sometimes people get the misconception that, I'm in a class or I'm in a seminar and I'm disruptive. I am not. I'm a when in Rome kind of guy, but at the same time, I have this platform and I'm going to express my opinion. Sometimes how I am in these podcasts does not reflect the kind of energy and spirit that I bring when I'm under someone's class as a student and digesting the information that they have. Being respectful is a part of it, but at the same time, you may not have the opportunity to have these discussions with the seminar instructor or with this luminary, this FMA Jesus, that you've paid a lot of money to be baptized with. So just take accountability for it. And look, we started this conversation with me saying that you're one of my FMA instructors. And that's what you teach me about Filipino martial arts, is that I got to take accountability. Right? I got to be logical. I have to take in as many sources of information as I can and be intelligent about how to curate that information. Is this art? Is this history? Is this culture? Is this something that I could use? And how do I figure that out?
Well, I think one of the things for us anyway, and for the IDS philosophy, is that we shun standardization as we do poison. That's one of our ethos, right? We shun standardization. We're not about outcome-based training. We're about performance-based training, because we realize, one, there are no two students that are the same, and that what's effective for one student may not be effective for another student. Two, we know that the variables in violence are not repeatable and they're not predictable. So we believe we need to have adaptable principles that will adapt to those changing variables, fluid and changing variables, all the time. So we believe that we want to teach students principles so that they can design their own program and they can design their own system. Well, what's going to be best for them, their attributes, their lifestyle, and their circumstances, not for ours. Training and set, as Bruce Lee said, training in set patterns only creates a better cage for yourself.
Word.
Right. And so this is, these are some of the reasons why we always say, I always say, one, we don't give absolute answers to contextually dependent questions. That's the first thing. And then we always say, we're putting this forward for your consideration here. And then we want to take a look at what you're doing. And our job is to tell you what the pros and cons are for those choices. But ultimately, it's up to you. Your defense is yours. It's nobody else's.
Absolutely. And I think that could be a fundamental difference between what you are and what some traditional martial arts are, in that you empower your students to innovate and to take the information that's been given to them and to make it their own. That sounds very Bruce Lee-ish, but it's true. I've created my own drills based upon what classical drills are supposed to teach me. So if I'm doing a classical drill and my instructor says this is supposed to develop your timing, but I don't feel like this drill actually does up to a point, I'm going to modify that drill so that it continually works my timing or my distance management or my power or my ability to do this and that. And it isn't really that hard. I just think that in traditional martial arts, there's this idea that we're going against hundreds, maybe thousands of years of wisdom. And so the student who emerges as a newcomer feels whatever the opposite of empowered is, that they don't have the ability to innovate, that they can't possibly take these concepts and make it their own, even though Brucey Bruce says that's what we ought to be doing. Right? So,
well, everyone's process is different. What timing for one person is going to be different for another person.
It's going to be
so for someone like you to say this isn't really developing my timing, I need to find another way for me to develop my timing. That's where the real learning is at. That's the nectar, man. Like, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, but then I suck at these Filipino martial arts drills and I don't look as cool.
Is it really about being good at a drill, or is it about how the skills transfer over into reality?
Well, a little bit of both, man.
The firearms
for the gram.
The firearms world is very much like that.
Everyone
there's entire Facebook pages that are dedicated to people mastering a drill. And they post every day about what their latest results are on how they're doing on mastering this drill. It's like, my God,
right?
You guys, what you're mastering is a parlor trick. You want to master a parlor trick, really? Well, okay, that's cool if that's what your jam is, but please don't imply that it's self-defense, because that ain't it.
Yeah, and the thing is, this whole implication, this implying that it's self-defense, I think the broad nature of students are just not equipped to identify what's what. And so an instructor presenting a really cool looking drill out of context, I think a lot of them understand that what it's doing, the impression that it's giving. And I think it's a little bit of a scapegoat. But at the same time, bro, like, I'm in social media, and I'd like to think that I'm presenting to a more educated audience, and that I don't need to necessarily spoon feed every time I do a drill or something beautiful and artistic to say, it's almost self-deprecating, right? Where I do something that I love, this drill, this moment, this movement, and then at the end, I'm going to go, by the way, guys, that was just art. That wasn't anything for self-defense. I suck at, So there's that, especially if you're a high frequency content creator.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, sometimes I do wish audiences were more educated, and we can circumvent a lot of the discussions that happen in forums. I call them discussions very loosely. They're more like, dick measuring contests. But I just, that's my hope. That's my wish, that I don't need to necessarily spoon feed each and every time that, hey guys, yeah, of course, this is I'm doing a carenza, you guys, chill out.
I agree with you. I wish it was that way, but me, like, I'm really careful. Like, well, I put all my disclaimers up early about being intellectual. I like to put all my intellectual honesty up front as much as I can, and then throughout the course of the whole piece of whatever video that I'm working on, I like to do that, because I do want to start. I'd like to see a real meaningful change happen in the distinction between, something that is artistic or skill building versus something, that is self-defense. Shooting is not self-defense.
Right.
It's just like shooting isn't the game of basketball, man. Like, get the fuck out of here. If someone told me they were teaching a basketball camp and I was going to go for a week and I was going to pay them $1,100 and all we did was shoot free throws and 3-pointers, set shots with nobody defending me, and I'm not learning the rest of the game.
Right.
If that happened, you would be sued.
Yeah.
You would be sued for fraud and for false advertising. But in the martial arts world, for some reason,
you can do that.
In the firearms world, for some reason, that's fucking okay, man.
Yeah, like you can say, hey, I'm holding a Filipino martial arts self-defense clinic and seminar, and do, nothing but patterns, and, and like, that's not self-defense. No, not to say that those things don't have value. That's not what we're saying, right? We need free throws. Like, we need to work on our free throws, right?
Yeah.
We need to do that stuff. But it's about intellectual honesty. Now, Todd, this guy, Xander Ju de los Santos, posed a question. I'm going to reformulate it. And he says, what's the difference between modern, Filipino martial arts versus classical Filipino martial arts? Let me reframe that real quick for you. What is the difference between, the way firearms have been classically taught versus the modern, more practical way to teach it? Draw the martial arts bridge.
I'll just say that the way that IDS
yes, yeah, let's do that.
Because the rest, pretty much, if you take a look at the firearms world as a whole, they're still in the dark ages, if you ask me. Almost every conceivable way that I can think of, they still prioritize the fine motor and marksmanship skills first when they're the lowest priority on the list. They don't teach anything else. It's worse than FMA is in terms of the dogma, because at least you guys in FMA are touching hands. At least you're feeling energy and pressure and you're working on timing. Firearms people just stand there and shoot holes in paper and call it good, man. Like, I don't even know like where to begin. It's so these firearms instructors will talk about, at least in the firearms world, they'll talk about the use of force continuum, but they won't teach anything else in the use of force continuum.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Where in firearms world, if you go to a class twice a year, man, you're doing good, and you're ready. At least in the martial arts world, you're hopefully going on a regular basis, right?
Right.
Or it's encouraged to be going on a regular basis, and their model is set up where students are coming every day.
Now, to answer you, Xander, in my opinion, and going off what Todd has said. I think the difference between modern and classical practice is the school, the organization, the instructor's willingness to adopt new ideas and to adapt to this modern landscape. I was speaking with Datu Kelly Warden the other day, and he says that he doesn't believe that traditional martial arts are psychologically and even physically, it hasn't been adapted to North America, because these things were created in a specific era, specific to a clan or a tribe with specific environmental conditions. And if you're going to just take that whole entire thing and transfer it to a different land with different people, with different laws, with different terrain, that's going to require the student to make these modifications if the instructor is not going to do that. So that would, for me, that's how it would be differentiated.
I see another correlation now that I'd like to add in the firearms side of it.
Rock
that
on,
I think might correlate to what you're saying, but correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the firearms training world is directly influenced from military firearms training.
Yes, it is.
One, in the style in which it's taught, and two, in the manner and methods that are being taught. And that really has little to nothing to do with the types of variables that citizen defenders are facing on a day-to-day basis. You're comparing apples and oranges, man. Like, they're both fruit. They're both fruit, but that's just about where it ends. Yeah. And I'll tell you that those engagements and the skills that they develop in the military really, we have all kinds of military that will drop into our classes from time to time, and you can just tell they have very little time or training at all behind their handgun. Like, they're not. So I don't know why military people feel like because they wore a uniform, they're somehow qualified to. It's not this automatic qualification. Like, I don't understand that. I know that people are pissed off right now and they think I'm being unpatriotic. If you know,
they don't know you, man. They don't know you, bro.
If you know a little bit about my background and how hardcore of a patriot I am,
you're one of the most America dudes that I know, and you love our veterans, and you love the service that law enforcement provides to the community. What you're saying is that uniform does not work for everybody, and I like this bridge, right? Because just because you're a black belt in whatever, and you're gonna take that classical thing that works here and under these conditions and apply it here under different conditions, you're asking for trouble, man. You're asking for. And look, you talked about standardization. That works for the military. That works for law enforcement.
It has to, because they have so many people that they're moving through that training, right? They have to have a standardized approach. They have to have standardized operating procedures. They have to have qualifications so they can weed people off and part them off into different teams and MOSs, right?
Right.
But for us as citizens, and they have there's a lot of standardized variables that they're faced with that we don't have.
Yeah. And so let's just take this moment, right? As you took a moment to say that you are a patriot and that you appreciate the service of your nation's veterans, I also want to say that I love traditional martial arts.
Yes.
I love it, and it has a purpose and a place, but, I don't live in a mountainous region in China with Mongols about to, disrupt the peace of my village.
Right? I think it could be argued that the fact that you're willing to ask hard questions, you still there?
I'm still here, bro.
The fact that you're willing to ask hard questions and innovate is proof that you do love it.
I love it so much.
That you're not willing to. You don't have to go along to get along to prove that you love it. And it's the same with being a patriot. Being a patriot's all about being ruggedly independent and independent in your thinking. Innovation is what America is about. And if we can innovate and keep this country safe by asking hard questions, by simply drawing distinctions between one method and another method or one group and another method is not, to me, is the epitome of being a patriot.
Absolutely. Man, what a great conversation, Todd. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, bro. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, guys, let me just say real quick, look, this dude is one of my FMA instructors, and I hope you guys got a little bit of an idea as to why I characterize him as such. There's so much to the Filipino martial arts that is misunderstood, that's misrepresented, and just, it's not really a known thing, right, Todd? Like, and by the way, can you do me a favor, Mr. Fossey?
What's that?
You have one of the greatest ambassadors of the Filipino martial arts in your backyard, and you train with him. Will you friggin' pick up a knife and a stick and just do a friggin' flow drill with Greg Nelson, please? You never, come on, bro. Why not? That's Greg Nelson. Inosanto, full instructor, right? Rose Namajunas.
Dude,
Nustro.
if I'm spending time with Greg, I'm spending time on grappling and MMA and weapons-based combatants.
Come on. Okay, how about this? If you find a moment where you wouldn't have been training anyway, maybe you're having a drink with where it's not taken away from your friggin' training time, so important. Go swing a stick with them. Go have a bit of fun and just 5 minutes.
I'll give it some thought.
How about this? How about this? You do defense against blunt weapons, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So what if you face like a super skilled Filipino guy like me, and all of a sudden your defenses don't work? I'm just joking. Find a way. Like, come on, bro.
Probably not.
Oh my gosh! All right, well I'm gonna have to travel over there. And I'm going to ambush you with some Filipino martial arts. And we're like, Todd, high five. I'm just joking. And then before you know it,
be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for.
All right, guys. Todd, thank you very much for your time, brother. I appreciate you. If people want to get to know a little bit more about Todd Fossey, they can find you. Where would you like people?
Hey, can I make a request?
You can make a request.
You are so awesome about promoting myself and IDS. Can I make a request for the future? Will you send them to our social media, like our YouTube channel and Facebook page? We would really appreciate that. So Integrative Defense Strategies on Facebook and YouTube. And of course you can see I've got a lot of content as a contributor up on Funker Tactical and Aperture Fight Focus as well. So be honored if you guys checked us out on all those places.
Yeah, there it is. Boom. Just like Google that and then find his Instagram and his Facebook page and listen to some of the crazy things that Todd says that really make a whole ton of sense. There are FMA lessons in there. I swear, guys, he is an FMA instructor. Datu Tuhan, Todd Fossey, thank you very much for joining us today, my brother. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy. Love you, man. Talk to you later.
Love you, bro. Peace. All right, dudes. Wow. You guys like that? Oh, look. Sammy already looking into Todd Fossey, Matthew Dorman. Look at that. I would pay to see Todd do a flow drill. I'm going to teach Todd Sabayan, and I am going to get him to find opportunities for arm drags out of it. Yeah, by the way, Todd, I know you're still listening. Coach Greg Nelson uses Hubad and Simbrata to facilitate arm drags to get dominant angles and to facilitate takedowns or striking. So give it a shot, man. Filipino martial arts is super dope. Super, super dope. The Rage Ing is here. By the way, guys, stay tuned at Aperture Fight Focus. I'm going to do a podcast with Rage, actually, a little bit later on. But he's going to be talking about running, one of my favorite activities. I hate running. But anyway, guys, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to hit the like button. It just lets the YouTube algorithm know that you're down with the FMA, and it's going to serve these videos up to other people who are down with FMA. And then we can build a community of logical, progressive, innovative Filipino martial artists who also do not throw away the art, the history, the culture, and the beauty of the Filipino martial arts, the way it was, the way it has been, the way that it should also continue to be while we evolve and progress this just beautifully diverse art. All right, guys, I love Filipino martial arts. Matthew Dorman, can you share this? Absolutely. Please, please, please share it. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I know a bunch of you dudes are watching from Facebook. Please go to FMA Source on YouTube. You have to look up my name, Paulo Rubio, and just hit the subscribe button, man. But if you're actually down to like watch more of this stuff, hit that notification bell. I know a lot of you guys are like, that's too much work. But please, I really appreciate it. I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to do things for Filipino martial arts as far as, like preserving all of the good stuff from the past, moving it forward into the future, and finding guys like Todd Fossey who can really integrate the very same principles and philosophies and ideas and concepts. And it's up to us, really, right, as we discussed, it's up to us as students to be able to take and intake information from as many sources as possible. And as homeboy Bruce Lee said, we got to make it our own. So this is all I'm really trying to do. I super appreciate what you guys do here for me. Thank you guys very much for joining. How do you spell Todd's last name? Fossey. Fossey. Todd Fossey. The moment I met Todd from day one and I understood what his message was, I told him 2 words, and those 2 words still mean something to me today. And I said, I'm in. I'm into what you're doing. I'm in to help out. I'm in to spread the message. And, and these days I'm really, really happy to see the state of integrative defense strategies. It's done so much for me. My friendship with Todd has really enriched my life in more ways than one. Certainly, it's enriched my Filipino martial arts. And guys, when I say these things, I don't mean to take away from all the other amazing Filipino martial arts masters who contribute to my journey. It's all love. It really is all love. When I say I love Todd Fossey and what he does for my FMA, I got dudes like Tuhan Philip, Tuhan Jack Latorre, Tuhan Jared Wihungi, Grand Tuhan Leo Gahe, GM Bobby, Darren Tabone, who I've never met, but we message a lot, GM Carlito Bonjoc, Dan Inosanto, Diana, Ron, like all these dudes and dudettes, Manala Ra Pagan, Jason Jones. Jason, what you guys know about Jason Jones, man? Mandala, Jason Jones, Kid Asenas, Patch Caballero, all of these people contribute to my FMA journey. It's nothing but love, but at the end of the day, it's my FMA. They share a little bit about who they are, their experiences, and I make it my own. It becomes mine, and I would like to share that with you. And so, yeah, let's build this community up. I think FMA needs it. Big shout out to FMA Discussion. Want you guys just take a moment, find FMA Discussion. If you're really down with FMA, Dean Franco does a great job of documenting the minds of so many amazing FMA luminaries out there. He even had Todd Fossey on yesterday, which was dope. And it inspired me to do this podcast. So big shout out to you guys. So again, anything you can do to help, thumbs up on this video. Heck, maybe thumbs down on this video if you really didn't like it. Still helps me out. Leave a comment. Let me know you appreciated this. And if you didn't appreciate it, well, leave a comment about why you don't. If you're really down, hit that subscribe button. And if you're super down, hit that notification bell. Until next time, thank you guys again so much. My name is Paulo Rubio, a.k.a. GN. This is FMA Source, and this has been another episode of the FMA Dumpster Fire podcast. Thank you, guys.